Believers and non-believers alike know about Mary. She's the mother of Jesus. But who is she beyond that? According to some apocryphal stories, Mary could walk at 6 months, was sent into the wilderness by the high priest only to return unharmed, and even comes face to face with the dragon. But when we look at the Bible for clues about Mary, she can seem a little mysterious. If we are to believe the customs of the time, we can assume that Mary was probably a young woman. Women in these days got married around 14 to 20. Mary may have been attended by angels, but we can still assume that she probably felt shaken and powerless. After the angels tell her what's going to happen, the first thing she says is, "How can this be?" Mary, in many ways, shows us the right way to be obedient. Doubt and trust God. Just because Mary is obedient doesn't mean that she's fully on board with the decision. Faith here, and faith in our own lives, happens in stages. Mary never says, "Yes, let's do this." And she definitely doesn't say, "I get it, God. I completely understand." To walk with God isn't to understand God. To walk with God is to trust God. The faith that comes organically happens in stages over time. And that's Mary in a nutshell. We don't know when she died, although it is widely believed that she was cared for by John. While we don't know a lot about Mary, we know enough to start painting a picture of her. Think of yourself at 16. Maybe you weren't a rebel hanging out past 1 a.m. and doing drugs, but I can say that most certainly you weren't exactly ready for adulthood. You relied on your parents more than you probably cared to admit. Mary at 16 seems like a senior. Mary didn't marry a wealthy man. We know Mary is at the bottom of the social ladder, and now she's pregnant with someone else's baby. It really doesn't get much lower than that. But Mary accepts it with obedience. As Jesus went into the wilderness before his ministry began, he may have had a pep talk with Mary, who told him that having faith did not mean free of doubt. Mary carried 9 months of doubt, 9 months of people asking about the baby's father. So Jesus is out in the wilderness, and perhaps one thing on his mind is Mary telling him that it's okay to question everything. To doubt everything because it's going to build up armor that will protect you from any spiritual attack. We don't know a lot about what Mary teaches Jesus, but one thing we can assume is she had the talk with them. Get your minds out of the gutter, not that talk. The other talk. The one about making hard choices, about putting God above all else. It's the choice that Mary made. She didn't rejoice at the idea of being shamed for having a baby outside of marriage. We look at Mary as a saint today, but those who knew her, there was nothing saintly about her. She knew she made the right choice, and yet there were years of stares and whispers that must have impacted her greatly. And so when Jesus comes to the Garden of Gethsemane near the end of his life and throws himself on the ground in prayer, Jesus isn't rejoicing in his choice either. Perhaps he's thinking about his mom, someone who knew the pains of doing God's will. But he's going to take up his cup because it's God's will. Jesus was a man who was raised in a home that knew more than anyone else what it meant to do God's will.